Hello, Maga. We're live. How
Hello,
are you?
Chin.
Great
Very
to
well. How are
see
you?
you. Great to see you. Yeah.
Yeah, this is
So
the
I
first
want
time
to. Yeah, yeah.
that
So my name
we
is
talk to each
Ching.
other.
My name is Ching. This is Juhl Media, a live interview program. Also, kind of AKA become a podcast now. So wonderful to have my guest today is Marga Zambrana, who is a international journalist, and yeah, she has been writing for major press organizations and for many years, and she also traveled to China, and where she met my brother in China. That was which year?
Okay, that was actually, my God, 20 years ago. This
20
time,
years ago.
actually.
Wow.
20, yeah, because I moved to China. I'm very bad remembering numbers, but I remember the day I landed in Beijing. That was February 8th, 2003. So it was the first time I was there. I prepared myself quite a lot because I was already studying Chinese in Barcelona. I was also studying like Chinese contemporary history and culture and everything. But it was the first time I moved there, so I just landed for my planning was for 1 year. And we didn't know that in February already there was the first COVID SARS. The SARS was already
Yes. Yes.
happening in Hong Kong. So, my idea, I went there first as a student because it's very difficult to get a journalist visa if you are a freelancer. At that time, it was very complicated. So I enrolled myself at Tsinghua Meishu Shuiyuan. Uh,
Very well. Tsinghua. Wow.
Meishu Shuiyuan because I was
Meishu.
before I went into journalism, I was studying fine arts. So I thought, okay, if I go to the languages school of a fine art school in China, it's not going to be that shocking, because artist environment is the same everywhere, right? Very similar. So yeah, I mean, I was studying there since February, and then I think it was probably March or April that we began, like hearing about SARS. So it was really terrifying, because I mean, the health authorities didn't know at that time how to deal with it. It was a much more lethal virus than the COVID that we had in 2019. I remember at that time the mortality rate was, in between the 40 and 60%. That was pretty scary, right? And it was very fast. I mean, the people would die like in a couple of days. Anyhow, so I just moved there with my savings. So I needed to go like every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks to the bank, to turn my travel checks into cash. But there was a time that there were travel checks in this planet. So I
Yes,
remember,
travel
yes,
check. Yeah,
yes,
those.
yes. So I was like, I didn't know what was the best time, the best way to go to China and to, how to bring my savings there without having a bank account. I mean, whatever. So I went to the Bank of China, 中国银行, and I see 中国银行, yes,
Oh
in
yeah.
the
Oh no 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 no! I know what you're getting into. You're gonna tell the story of how you met my brother. Oh, that's so
yes.
fantastic. Okay, okay,
it,
okay.
it was very funny. Yeah, we talked about that before, but it was really funny. So, I was there like with, even though I was, I studied before Chinese, but Chinese was still very, very basic. So I couldn't understand everything very well. So I was, like there in online waiting for going to the cashier. And I see this guy with long hair and with colorful highlights. And I like, and I also could see like some gray hair. And I was like, okay, this is not the normal Chinese guy, because, at that time and even nowadays in China, men, when they get older, they like to dye their hair. They want to look always like, they have this black hair, like young. So I was like, okay, what is this? And he was wearing this, you know, uh, palm, like green palms, shirt, like very colorful and very like Californian wise or something like that. And then suddenly he turned back to me and said, "Okay, are you in a hurry? Because I'm going to be spending like a lot of time, talking to this to the bank staffer. So I suggest you to change, to another line because that's going to take longer." And I was like, "Oh my god," that was very surprising. It's like, "Oh my god, he also speaks English, perfect English." So that was really like, like very interesting, and we became closer eventually. So as I told you when we first talked, it's kind of your brother Evan, who was a very very unique, unconventional, charismatic person, somehow shaped the way that I see or I look at China. Because he was so open-minded. I mean, he was like so out of any kind of political influence. His point of view was very particular and very realistic. So I feel like he really shaped the way that I look at your country, and the way that I understand it. And also he was like an exceptional character because of this unconventional way of you know uh, living, and his very unique point of view on things, and his very dark sense of humor.
So did you guys like hang out like so tell me some things you did. Like did you go to his place, listen to his music and stuff like that?
Yeah, yeah. That was like it was like a different world. I think you went to his house in the outskirts of Beijing, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
very interesting because he was like an eremit, right? He was like, I mean, he's a very interesting character with a lot of opposite uh, characteristics. Like he was very sociable, but he was living like in this very secluded big house where he had like a music studio downstairs, and lots of cats. I remember the house was full of cats. So
In
yes, I used to go.
Europe, right? People in Europe like to have cats. Like I was in Greece, there's cats everywhere, and also in Croatia, cats everywhere. I'm not sure in Istanbul, you probably have a lot of cats.
Istanbul is the city of cats. No, I mean, it's so crazy. I mean, there are
Yeah.
like plenty of cats in the streets.
Yeah.
Everybody takes care of them.
Uh-huh.
They feed them. They build houses for them, like like
Yeah.
carton, like
Yeah.
boxes, like these carton boxes. They create houses for them. So the cats in Istanbul, they are like like the kings of the city because they are so relaxed. They are not scared
Mm.
of people or
Yeah.
cars. Like
Yeah.
and everybody likes to take care of them. Yeah, yeah. It's a very cats, like kind of a capital city for cats or something like
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah. So I have a question for you. It's so wonderful that you heard you reach out to me because
Mhm.
you saw my YouTube channel talking about Evan. How did that happen?
Yeah. Okay. So it's very difficult to track Evan in social media because he was not in social media. So the thing is, last time we talked, it was like in November 29th. He sent me this voice message. I mean, I like texting because I'm a camera person, so I don't like voice or sound interrupting. But I remember like more than a year ago, he switched it to voice messages. He said, I prefer to send you a voice message because it's like more personal, or it feels warm. We say okay. So we start exchanging these voice messages. And he told me that was like at the end of November, yeah, 29th November, and he told me that he was traveling to Shenzhen for trip. I don't remember exactly. I mean, what it was. And then he told me about the protest in Shanghai. So I used this quote for the analysis I was writing about the protests in China for a Spanish online media called El Confidencial. But of course, I didn't want to expose him, so I just used his, surname, your surname, which is Chen. There are like how many? 200 million people surnamed Chen in China. So I was sure I was not exposing him, and it was like, nothing really complicated. But after that voice message, I didn't hear from him. So I started feeling worried, like something might have happened to him. When you work in China as a journalist, you become reasonable paranoid that all your right,
Interesting.
that all, yeah, all your social media are going to be monitored. Um, also your sources. I mean, I learned how to meet activists in China without exposing them by having different these old Nokia smartphones, like the old ones, because they can't be tracked. I mean, things like that. So I began feeling like a bit paranoid. Like I thought maybe, I've exposed him by using his quote. Maybe people know because we were always communicating in WeChat, in Weixin.
Mhm.
Um, but it was kind of weird. So I kept, texting him, like, like, thank you for your message. I hope you're whatever. I also like, congratulate him for the new year, for the new Chinese year. And then I go like, okay, this is too long. This is really weird. I thought maybe he's detained or he's got COVID. So I got worried. And then I remember, because time to time I check people that, I lost kind of contact, like visual contact with, because everything is now in social media. So I remember I saw this interview with him, like in this very same channel, like 2 or 3 years ago during the first year of COVID or something. And I thought, oh, right. He's got a sister living in America, and also he was like, talking about you in his WeChat profile. So of course I checked for you. I was okay. It's not gonna be that difficult to find her because he's a YouTuber. And then I found what I was like, terrified to find out. That was precisely that he passed away a few hours after he sent me his last message. So I went through, so much shock. And I don't know, it's kind of weird, because of the distance. It's not like we saw each other. I mean, we just used to talk like maybe 4 or 5 times a year, but it was very interesting every time. So, that's how I reached out to you, because I wanted to know more. I wanted to know what happened to him, more about his life. And yeah, it was really, really shocking, because it's like, it's losing. I mean, I just cannot imagine what it is for you. The kind of grieving for me is losing like a great friend, and a great person that I was lucky to meet, and he had, I think, like a lot of influence on me in terms of my time of China, my 10 years there. Mm.
Wow, that's a long time. That's wonderful. So 2003, I think that year I actually took my family back to Shanghai, stayed there for 3 months. So now, for those of you who have no idea what are we talking about right now, I just wanted to do a really brief, just to summarize, is that Marga met my brother in China 20 years ago, and they kept a friendship and they kept texting each other all on WeChat. And my brother suddenly died 5 months ago, November the 30th. He died, and you text each other on November 29th. And I actually talked to my brother on November, I would say, also 29th. Like we called him. We is my husband, my child. We actually WeChat him, blah blah blah, and he's like, "Oh, tomorrow I'm going to Shenzhen." So same time you talk to him. So my brother was a very very talented musician, composer, and many he also wear many hats, right? Producer, and he plays the keyboard very well, and he speak English very well. He's just a really, really smart guy, and we still don't know to this day why he all of a sudden just died in a hotel room in Shenzhen. So that's what we're talking about, my brother. Now I always wanted to be a journalist. So now and I become like a video journalist myself. I give myself a title. So tell me a little bit, how did you be became a journalist? It's a profession I always like envy.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's too sexy. Like, but so it attracts a lot of people. We don't know what we are going to do with all these, fresh graduates from journalism who are going to go directly to the unemployment office. Um,
That's funny. Oh my god. Yeah.
yeah, I'm very real. I'm very straightforward. I think that's my Spanish side, because I don't identify myself as a Spanish or European after living abroad for 30 years now, which is
Yeah.
no, like
Yeah.
not 30, sorry, 20. Yeah, oh my God, like no, 20 something. Anyhow, so yeah, that's a very interesting question actually. Like, because in my country in Spain, when I was very young, uh, the journalists I met, I found them to be so arrogant that I didn't want to be a journalist. I was like, what? I mean, they have this big ego. I don't know. I felt uncomfortable with people like they are too arrogant, or maybe it's like a Latin character or something. So the thing is, I left my home like you when I was very young. I left when I was 18. So I had to to work and to support myself. And so I had an idea about what I would like it to do, but of course my primary priority was to survive, to pay for my bills. So it took me like a few years to decide what I wanted to do. But then, so I try to go. It's very interesting because I read a book by I think his name is James Hillman. It's like a Jungian psychologist, and I found about him through Robert Redford, which is a man that I admire very much. Because he's like also like your brother, like a Renaissance guy. That can do many different things in a very talented way, strong character, whatever. So later, after I made my choice, I realized that maybe I took the same path that James Hillman was talking about in his book. I think it's called like the acorn. I don't remember. I have it somewhere, but it's about the acorn. So his theory is like when you find what you really want to do in this life, it's like you fall in love, like a first sight love or something like that. So that was what happened to me. So I was kind of confused. I was like, I had very good grades at secondary school, so I could choose whatever I wanted. But I was kind of confused because I liked many different things at the same time. I like it to paint, I like it to travel, I like it to. So I tried to go back to the basics, and it was like, okay, I feel like most children know what they want to do. What you usually do the best is when you're trying to use your talents for yourself and to help other people. So my first, I tried to go back there, like to the raw Marga, to the simple thing. And then I discovered that probably my first calling was art. I was painting since I was very young, since I was a child. So I thought, okay, I don't have to worry about a profession that is gonna, like going to pay for my bills. I know art is not gonna pay for my bills, but I was very energetic. I'm workaholic, so I was like working in a company during the time, going to school in the afternoon. So I decided to go for fine arts, and I had like a fantastic time. It was like because I didn't have to worry. It's like I trust. I was confident about my ability to work and to make money through other ways, and then to use my spare time for doing art. But something happened in this process that I was like already, enrolled at university, and I made this kind of it's like a very spiritual trip. I don't know where it was coming from, but at that time, I think because my mother was about dying, she's got like a very difficult illness, and I thought, oh my God, I mean, death exists. It's not something common for someone who is 20 something years old. So I decided, okay, whatever, I don't know how long I'm going to be in this earth, but I think I need to try to do what I really like to do. So one of these things, and this comes also all together, it's like a delta, it's like a river going into a delta, which is the journalism. I just decided I wanted to come to Istanbul, and I took a train from Barcelona. It's like 3,000 kilometers far away. I crossed all the south of France. I crossed Italy. I went to Croatia, to the former Yugoslavia. And after, I don't know, it was like a week or 10 days, I finally arrived to Istanbul. At that time, there was no internet or wherever. So it's just because I saw Istanbul on a map. And I thought, okay, wherever I want to do, I'm going to go there. So I took my little savings, as a student, and I came to Istanbul. And then it was here when I met like another person that had, some influence in my life. So I met some Turkish journalists, and I thought, okay, I think now it is clear. I like, like I have this artistic side, but I like writing. I like traveling. I'm not scared to go to places alone to discover new places. I was skilled for languages as well. I was already like fluent in three
Oh yeah,
languages.
you spoke what? 4 or 5 languages.
Yes,
Amazing.
Spanish and Catalan because I'm from Barcelona, so those are my mother tongues. But I always also spoke French because we always have to choose like a foreign language. So against my will, and trying to be rational, I saw like, okay, Mark, I feel like, because art, I love doing art, but somehow I feel disconnected from reality. I felt that, like being close in your room or in your studio, working for 8 hours painting, I felt that I like something. I like this contact with real life, and I think I'm very much stuck to reality. I have a great imagination, but I always think that reality is much more interesting than anything that human being can, make up through imagination. So when I saw this, I thought, okay, I can do this, because I can write. I know how to write. I can make also pictures, which is something artistic. So I changed immediately. I left fine arts degree in my after my second year, and I moved into journalism school. So I started
Wow.
preparing.
Wow.
Yes. So I became a journalist when I was already like pretty old because I have to finish the second degree. I was learning at that time. I was learning Arabic,
Did you
but
go back to the school in Spain or did you continue school in Istanbul?
no, no, no. I went back to school in
Oh,
Spain.
oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I should have been more ambitious and going to a, to a different country to study, but I wanted to perfect my English. At one
Mm,
time was not very good,
yeah,
and so I have to, learn by myself and everything.
yeah.
So I decided to stay in Barcelona. Also because in Spain we still at the time we had like very good quality education almost for free. So
Mm,
why not to use the
yeah,
social democrat system
yeah,
for my
yeah.
for my education?
So
And
how
this
does
is how
that
I became.
wonderful? How does that work? Like for musician, right? We go to college, we go to graduate school, then we come out. We, if you want to be a professor in university, you have to have a PhD, some sort. If you want to be a performer, orchestra, you have to audition for the orchestra, and then the competition is incredibly uh, competitor, like one position only have like 100 people compete one position. But in journalism, so after you graduate, how do you get a gig? Like, can you be hired just by one network?
Mm, well, if this happens, it's like a miracle because like I feel like nowadays, like I would say, like more than a half, or I don't know what is the percentage, but according to my perception of what I see in my environment, I would say like maybe even 70% of journalists are freelancers. So in my case, it's a combination of luck, but also because I really was working so hard. You wouldn't believe. I remember for those during these years, I was sleeping average like 4 hours per night because I needed to work, I needed to study. I was aware I was beginning this career like a bit older than usual, and I was very ambitious. So I worked very hard. And luckily, after this, the first year, I had very good grades, so I could choose where to go as an intern. So of course I chose the best ones. I chose, like El País, which is one of the most, the oldest, the more influential. It's more like a Democrat, social democrat, but it had like a top quality at the time. And I also chose to go to the to Barcelona local TV channel. That was very interesting at the time because it was one of the first in Spain where we would be working as what is was called at that time ENG, that now is videographer, right? So we would be like filming ourselves and doing the voiceover ourselves and writing the script ourselves and everything. So it was an amazing school. So of course after that I had like a very good, a very good CV, and I kept working for Barcelona's TV channel. So it was a great combination because usually in traditional journalism you have like the writers and then you have the visual journalists, right? Photographers or filmmakers, and they used to be like completely different worlds. And usually the writers don't feel and don't take very good pictures, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Filmmakers are not good writers and they don't care that much about the content. They care more about, visual is so beautiful, whatever. So I was very lucky in that sense because I was good doing both things. I was good writing and I was good filming also because of my fine arts background. But anyhow, so I took, I spent a couple of years there because I wanted to have some experience. But at the same time, I began studying Chinese because I thought, okay, I have to take some risks. If I stay here, and this is one of the topics that what I'm going to tell you now is one of the topics I've been working more recently because I realized that as so many people wanted to be a journalist and so many people wants to be on TV, actually it's very difficult, at least in Spain, to become a journalist with my experience unless you have good connections. You come from a good family, you can afford it. So it wasn't my case. I come from a family from the south of Spain. They were Andalusians and they were workers. They migrated to the north. There's a lot to talk about internal domestic migration because people think like, you move from China to America, then you are a migrant, wherever. But actually, inside your own country, there is a lot of, uh, you know, um, racism. Yeah, why not to call? So, I mean,
Mhm.
I come from a poor family and I am who I am because I have a social democrat education, this system that would protect you. So, I'm very proud of that. So I decided, okay, if I want to, to have a good career, solid career, I have to take risks. So the risk was learning Chinese and moving to China because nobody wanted to go there. The language is so difficult. It wasn't a touristic place at that time. It's a communist regime. So it was everything like nobody wanted to have it. It looked not fun from the outside, right? And I thought, okay, I have to make this sacrifice. Like I have to go to places where people usually don't want to go. I mean, for instance, it's kind of funny because my first choice was actually here, the Middle East, and conflict. I was attracted by conflict because I don't know, it's part of reality. But actually, conflict was very sexy at that time.
Mm.
So there was already this bunch
Yeah,
of journalists going to conflicts. That is like kind of a clan, like a gang. It's like a tribe.
right.
And I thought, okay, no one of them want to go to China. And I remember that many people was telling me like, you're crazy. Why are you going to go to China? What is happening there? And I thought, okay, nobody's reading international media. They don't realize. And that was 2000, the year 2000. I think Beijing got the Olympic Games like a couple of years later, something like that. But you
Yeah.
could tell, like, if you could read international media, you could tell that China was already very important. So I feel like I made the right choice because I arrived there and there were, not too many Spanish journalists at that time. Most of them wouldn't speak Chinese. So I thought, okay, I'm going to take this risk. I'm going to bet for this. I went there with my savings and I said, if I'm not able to find a good job and to be fluent in Chinese in 1 year, then I go back to Spain and I forget about journalism. But I
So
succeeded.
what are the what are the most, say, two or three shocking things when you arrive in China? I guess arriving Beijing, right? Is that the city you first?
Yes. I arrived in Beijing in February during the Chinese New Year. It was not even snowed in. It was like iced in. There was this kind of ice on the streets, black ice because of the pollution. So I thought, okay, I prepare myself. I know where I'm coming. But it was very shocking because it wasn't very aesthetic. The buildings were gray. It was polluted. It was very cold. I realized nobody would understand my Chinese because my tones pronunciation was really bad. So I was like, oh my God, as a Mediterranean person, I'm used to the Mediterranean Sea, the pine trees, like a nature beauty. I was like, maybe I came to the wrong place. So I remember that after I left my stuff at the school, I thought, okay, I'm going to take a cab. I'm going to Tiananmen because I want to see something beautiful. I want to feel like.
Yeah.
So I got into the cab and I go like, okay, 我要去 And then I was like, what? 什么? And I like, okay, what is going wrong? Tiananmen, there is only one Tiananmen, right? So I tried for 5 minutes, like, Tiananmen. And it was like, 什么? 我听不熟. And it was like, okay, so I tried until I finally make it right. Tiananmen. It was,
Mm.
oh, there on, Tiananmen. So we go
Yeah.
there. And that was good. Okay, it's like you need to go to a place that, that sounds familiar to you to begin having some emotional connection to that place,
Right.
you know. And China, differently from other countries that are like more appealing, for journalists like the Middle East or I don't know, for tourism like Southeast Asia, more colorful. China
Mm.
was not that exotic actually.
Mm. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
uh, you go to Japan and it's pretty exotic. You go to Southeast Asia, it's pretty exotic. Beijing at that time, and I'm talking about the year 2003, was for me was great. It was developing very fast. It has like these very old buildings from the 60s. So it was kind of weird. So I tried to find this emotional connection. It was very difficult. So my first idea was going to Tiananmen. So it was shocking. I mean, these things were shocking, like the pollution. People were very rough. I mean, there was no private space. I remember that anyone would come into my room without my without my permission because they are so curious and they're like, okay, this is not private space at the time, right?
Yeah.
Um,
So how was the impression to Tiananmen? Was it a daytime or nighttime, or were you
I think it was
impressed?
like, yeah, of course, I was impressed. It was like almost sunset, if I remember
Okay.
properly.
Yeah.
So of course I was very impressed because the square is so big. I think it's 1 kilometer long. uh, and I needed to see something colorful, something traditional. And that's another thing when you go to China. There is like a Spanish writer who wrote a book about China. And I remember the first sentence he wrote was, when I went to China, China was not there anymore. So you have this impression because we all have in our mind, like the old movies, or the traditional China, the China of the dynasties. So when you move there, you don't find any of this. So of course, when I went to Tiananmen, I know it was a cliche, right? Because you needed to have like, okay, I know I'm in Beijing now. But it was very impressive because the architecture is so balanced. Everything is so very balanced, and you can see all the extension of the square. People having fun there, like they were flying. What's the name? Kites. I remember, and everyone was taking pictures. And at that time, I think it's still happening, but not that much. If you were like a Western person, uh, many Chinese would approach you. They would be, they might be coming from provinces thinking that you are an actor, a Hollywood actor, and they wanted to take pictures with you. So it was like a very interesting time because China was already developing, but there was still this kind of ingenuity, this naivete, when dealing with foreigners. So I think the energy is very different now. But at that time, it was very, very exciting. So another thing that shocked me after a while, I think it took me like more than a year to go back to my country, uh, was that when I was leaving to the airport to fly back to Barcelona for holidays, I was almost crying. I don't know how did it happen, but I felt that I already developed this emotional tie with China, and that was completely unexpected. For instance, with Istanbul, it was like almost immediate. But with China, I don't know. It's something that I can't explain properly. I think that once I start doing journalism there and to get closer to people, I met your brother, I met other people, other artists as well. And when you start like knowing more about the life of Chinese people and their feelings, is when you develop this emotional link with the country. So I was in shock that I made it actually. That I could
Wow.
feel like, yeah, a lot of things for that beautiful and amazing country. That makes you feel so humble. You have always to learn.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Now, can you tell us a little bit about you are involved in research and about sexual and gender based violence in areas like in what Iraq, right? And
Yeah.
you also produced a documentary called The
Yeah.
Voice of Yazidi Women. Could you tell us
Yeah.
a little bit about your work? And maybe we
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
watch a little bit of that film.
Did you watch the documentary?
Yes,
It's so,
yes,
oh, how did you like it?
yes. I love it. I love it.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
It's a raw editing. I should have edited better, but it was okay. That's a interesting part of my life. So basically, I started. When I moved to Istanbul, I was after 10 years in China. I was very tired, so I thought, okay, I just want to make like this kind of lifestyle things. I don't want to get into politics. I don't want to get into conflict. I
Mm.
want to have. I need some fresh air from China because after such
I
a
have a
long time, you need
question
like. Mhm,
before. I have
yeah.
a question. So, out of so many countries, right, near Spain, um, why Istanbul? Why you picked there to live?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Well, because after 10 years, I needed to, I didn't feel like I wanted to go back to Spain. It's just such a long time when you are living abroad, and you might share this feeling as well that you go back to your country and you don't feel you belong there anymore.
Mm,
Uh, and also, it was like because I built my career abroad, I had the same problem than 10 years before. I have no, guanxi. I have no contacts. I mean, the media I've been working for, I mean, they wouldn't be too prone to hire people coming from abroad, even if you've
mm,
been working for them as correspondent. So I thought, okay, no, I want to keep, when the thing with China is you become very obsessive about news in China. So it's like the rest of the world vanishes. So I thought, no, I need to open my horizons again. I don't know where to go. I need to think, because China was like a very rational, and I prepared in advance to go there. But after 10 years, I had no clear idea. I thought, okay, maybe another any emerging economy, maybe Brazil, maybe blah blah blah. I thought, okay, maybe I need some time to clear my mind and to make a decision. So Istanbul for me is like my second home. I feel so happy there, and it's also a very interesting country. complex politics, complex culture, very diverse. So, okay, so I'm going to take 1 or 2 years, just to stay in Istanbul, and then I will move somewhere else because I didn't want to become burned out with Turkey as it happened with China. That is pretty common after such a long time. So that's why I chose Istanbul because I thought I want to be closer to my hometown. I think it's also very important that 2 years before I moved here, my father passed away suddenly. It was very, very unexpected. So, this trip from Beijing to Barcelona that took like so many hours, knowing that your father is not there anymore. I mean, it was the most terrible trip I've ever did in my life. So I thought, okay, I don't want to go through this when my mother lives as well. So I want to be also closer. I don't want to be taking like, I don't know, it was crazy because I also lost the connection in Paris or something like that. So, I mean, it was very dramatic. So I thought, okay, I need to be closer to my family for a while. So I was, okay, let's go to Istanbul and then I will decide. So that's why I didn't want to get into politics. I was like, okay, this is going to be like holidays from China. I don't want to be obsessing anymore about what color were Mao Zedong's socks in 1965 because, you know, uh, foreign correspondents in China, we become like kind of freaks, of the Chinese culture and Chinese politics. So I wanted just to open. And I thought, okay, if I go back to Turkey, it's like going back to my origin as a journalist. Is where I decided to become a journalist. It's a city that always inspires me very much. So I came here just like as a break, but not. It wasn't a very conscious decision to stay here longer. But as it happened with the SARS in Beijing, after a couple of months after I landed here in Istanbul, Gezi protest began. So that was huge news. It's like SARS was in the front page for many months, and the Gezi protests here were something similar and was very unexpected. So I already did a bit of urban conflict coverage in China during the I don't know if you remember, but there was this Uyghur uprising in Urumqi in 2009. It wasn't the same because that conflict was more about civilians lynching civilians, which is like really so disturbing. It's horrible. But I was just here like doing like nice feature documentaries about old houses and luxury, and suddenly I was already freelancing with the Associated Press, and they needed all the freelancers, all the cameras here because the protests were happening everywhere in town. So I went, okay, let's do it. I'm a journalist. We are like soldiers. I mean, it's not about what you want to cover, but when there is a need, there is an emergency. Of course, you have to be there and to cover the news, covering the story. So this is actually when I became more interested in conflict because that's kind of the urban conflict situation is this kind of protest that lasted for almost, I mean, in the beginning 1 month, but then for like several months you would have protests coming here and there. People would kill. I mean, there were like 8 to 10 people killed by the canisters and the rubber bullets. And it was kind of, I don't know, people here remember this protest in 2013, like, the May 68 revolution in Paris or something like that. They were like mostly led by the secular, liberal young people who were opposing the, religious conservative policies by current president, Mr. Recep Tayyip Erdogan. So it was very inspiring, and it was also a way to connect with with a part of the society. So it was also like it was unplanned, but after I moved here, like kind of the development of news forced me to get more involved. And then is when I decided that okay, I can also try to cover like news coming from Syria in the Turkish-Syrian border. And this is when I start covering more, conflict and humanitarian crisis, migration, etc.
What is the documentary about? And can you tell us a little bit more about? You are one of the producers, or you are the producer?
I did everything.
Oh my God! So
Yes, I did the
who shot?
filming.
Who shot? You
Yeah,
filmed, and you
I,
edited.
I, yeah,
Awesome!
everything. Yeah, yeah.
Awesome!
It came because I start following, like, I start researching. So I basically what happened was that after 2013, 14. many of the teams covering inside Syria in the front line um, were sent back to their countries, or they were withdrawing because ISIS, the Islamic State, was already kidnapping journalists. So I had this new niche coming up, which the Turkish-Syrian border. So I started going to these cities, Gaziantep, Antakya, that now are destroyed by the earthquake. So I started becoming like more interested and more committed to covering, the more human stories. I mean, all these Syrians coming from the conflict, they had all terrible stories. So one of the topics, the recurring topics that I was covering was like the rape of Syrian prisoners, specifically women, in the Syrian regime prisons. It's one of the most horrible, I mean, so scary, the kind of tales that, the stories that they were telling. So through this experience, I had, like, of course, many translators, producers working with me, Syrians. It came out this gig with an NGO. So that was for a grassroots NGO called Yazda. They were like, their budget was coming from a Norwegian NGO. So those people were, ISIS went into North Iraq in 2014, and the Yazidis are like a ethnic religious minority. They have a very, very old religion. They are kind of very isolated from the rest of the, minorities and communities in Iraq. They are very endogamic. They only can marry between, among themselves. And they went through many attacks, over the centuries by, Christians, Muslims, because they considered that their religion was a satanic religion. I mean, there's this misunderstanding because it's like they are very endogamic. So they have an angel god, which is called Satan, and both Christians and Muslims would link it to Satan. So they thought, like, I mean, it's a cultural, a big cultural misunderstanding. So they have been regularly, like, attacked by other communities. So when ISIS took the north of Iraq, they decided that one of the main targets to destroy were this Yazidi community.
Can you
So
excuse me? Can we watch a little bit of this film, like say a minute or two? Do
mhm.
you have a preference in which section? Because this
Well,
film is
okay,
an hour 11 minutes.
yes, I know. He was supposed to be in the beginning like 20 minutes, but I
Oh,
will explain how it became like 1 hour and
do you
something.
have a trailer?
Okay, no, no, but we can
Oh,
go. Okay, so basically, so all the women were like raped and enslaved by ISIS. So I have to be very careful about filming them,
uh-huh.
because of course they didn't want to be this. That was for an NGO. So all these women were like, many of them were interviewed already by other international media,
Mm.
and they were traumatized because of these interviews. Okay, you can go, for instance. Okay, after this woman, there is like a group therapy. Like they are talking about their problems, and so it was
Here,
challenging in the sense that I couldn't
here,
film their faces.
here.
A bit. Okay, go a bit. Okay, this is the soldier. No, after. Yeah, no. Go farther, please. Uh, no, I want to go to the ladies.
Okay.
Uh,
So who is
okay,
this guy? He's talking. Who is he?
o- okay, so there were like the idea of the documentary was interviewing, or how to put it, like empower these
Uh,
women that had been portrayed in foreign media and in local media as sexual slaves. I mean, can you imagine you're raped by ISIS and then you see your picture in an international media say, oh, this woman was raped by ISIS like for 1 year. So
oh,
the NGO wanted me to meet with all of them and they would decide the content. They would
oh,
decide what they wanted to talk about. They would decide, for instance, this one. I mean, she's explaining, if you go a little bit back, there are two ladies talking. Oh, this is that was, I think,
here, here.
yeah, here, for instance, yeah. So see,
Okay,
I'm
okay, okay, okay.
okay, let's watch it and then I will,
Let
yeah.
me click to see if you can hear, okay? Because last week I
Mhm.
had some audio issues. So,
Okay.
um, can you hear?
Yes.
فتشت هذا سري يستيا
cuma kaunya din bu yani cuma ezdina و cuma ازديت وديت خدان parasen شفيك هذا سريوا cuma na هذا سري بسلمانيس شنغار cuma بسريوا أنا كده mana أوجي الرعبون هكام رعبون أوجي الرعب cuma بسريوا أنا هذا كده cuma ازدي ونافي ازدي سر ما بقوله ما هذا سريوا ليه ما باربزان بان خدي حرم تركا إنافي إزينا هذا وحرم تركا إزدينا هل حتى دنيم بيجنام إزينا وأم إزدينا
خدي إيزدي غلاكا إيزدي غلاكا سلامارا زلام مازن بويا زلامي إيزديا وإيزدي زلام شبر شخصيت خوا ودعاش خربكا باني خديكا و مثلا زلام شبر زيارات غلاكا أوجي مادفيم إيديت خوا قنجي بكن إيديت خوا نفسا بري عراقي بكن وروجيت خوات إيزي بقرن هو مادفيم إيزي يعني ما تشلو تشتش وان رد كراس أو إجباري بو بس ديني ما لازم أمجي جيكا ديني خوا بكن قالك إيزي دي قالك إيزي دي سري زلاما بيراد بقالك إيزي دي
بخودي براستی
Wow.
Yeah, these two
Yeah.
ladies, they were enslaved by ISIS. The second one, at the time that I interviewed her, she was 14 years old.
Wow.
And she was enslaved as a sexual slave by ISIS for almost 2 years. So she was taken when she was 11 or 12. So, it was like, the first days it was like terrible because I knew what they have been going through. So we decided to first to meet with the ones who they were willing to talk, and then I would be working with a psychologist. It was like probably the best filming I did in my life because we were taking so much care of the interviewees, and we would let them like decide how to appear on camera. I would even, to the youngest one, I remember she wanted to be on camera. She wanted to show her face because she just got released and she was so full of rage, which is a very normal feeling after this very traumatic situation. But actually, we convinced her not to do it, because she was just 14. How would she feel eventually over the years when she looked at herself? And I'm still in touch with them after that was filmed in 2017, and I'm still in touch with them now. They left Iraq. They're living in different countries, like many of them in Canada. So it's kind of, I think that we did like ethically a very good job. Also, we decided what they wanted to talk about. I convinced them that that we need to talk about your trauma as well, because otherwise the movie is not going to make any sense, even if it is just for it's like for NGOs use, is for for donors. But I think it's important to talk about that. So we were very, very careful and very sensitive to their needs and to their trauma. We also tried to choose the ones who wouldn't be re-traumatized by the interview. So if we felt that, because many of them, they say yes, we want to talk, because they feel that they have to give back to the NGO because they were like given support, like economic support as well. But we decided when I learned how to read the body language, and then I would say, no, you think that you want to talk, but actually you don't want to. So it was very interesting because I also let them. I already filmed Syrian women that went through the same situation, so I understood, all this. I'm very empathetic in that sense, which has a bright side and a dark side, So I would even film them, just the hands, for instance, or just the back, and then show it to them and say, how do you feel about that? Do you feel safe this way? You feel that people might recognize you? So it was interesting because in a couple of situations, and especially with the young teenager, I even let her the camera, and she was really enjoying with the camera. So I think like in some cases, actually, you always feel bad when making these kind of interviews because you are feeling like you are taking a part of their lives. Of course, our goal is to make their problem known so they can get help, and other people can prevent this problem. But you feel bad because you know that you might re-traumatize them. So in that case, I was so convinced that we were doing it right, that none of them got damaged to the interviews. So, it's kind of interesting because, for many, many years, I think like at least half of the journalists and the foreign correspondents and war correspondents are women. But these kind of topics haven't been addressed properly until recently. I remember when, I first started like, hanging out with guys, men, most of them, covering the conflict inside Syria, no, in the front line. I don't do front line. I haven't done it. I can't explain why. But I remember I would tell them, okay, so you go inside embedded with this faction, but I know this faction are like also doing the, not as much in quantity, but I know they're also raping women, from the other side. So can you report about that? And they were like, no, never. And this is something that, I don't like, I would like people not to idealize the job of a foreign correspondent, because there are many details, that you need to have a maturity, in these situations, because you need to make decisions about what needs to be covered, and how to protect your interests, how to protect, balanced information coming from both sides. So I was like, okay, so they are raping people. Why you cannot, report about that? And well, impossible. If we report about that, we cannot go inside again with this faction, or they might kill us, whatever. So they told me many of them, like they were very veterans. They've been covering conflicts for many, many years in Africa, Yugoslavia. They told me, but this always happened. Women got raped. And I'm like, okay, but people, you're talking about this like this is something normal. This is crime against humanity. And actually, there is a report by the UN about the case of the ISIS genocide, because they determined it was a genocide against Yazidi people. But for many men covering conflicts, the fact that they would see women being raped, that was something normal.
Miriam, our audience raised the question for you, says, how can you handle emotion in the face of so much destruction? How do you handle?
Well, I got affected eventually, because when you expose yourself so much to this kind of pain, and it's like kind of secondary trauma. As I say, I'm very empathetic, which is good because I'm very sensitive. I protect the sources, but at the same time, I empathize too much, so I can put myself in their shoes. So of course, you get secondary trauma. Well, people are different. I feel like there are journalists who are very cold-minded, and they can go through that for a long time without having any kind of effect. And some other people don't. It's not about you will never get it. It's the more you are exposed to this, there's going to be a point that you're going to get post-traumatic stress disorder, because for them they are telling their story for the first time, but you have been listening to these stories like for months, sometimes for years. So I think that is like everyone has a different limit, to process this kind of secondary trauma. So of course, I did. How to prevent it? Well, everyone has different ways. In my case, it was difficult because as a freelancer, I have to keep working. I didn't have holidays. I have to. I'm like a hamster in a wheel. But many of the people who, if you are a staffer, it's easier because you get, better working conditions. You get holidays. I was very shocked that, not only in our case, but also NGO staffers, they wouldn't get therapy from the company, from the NGOs. And also this is kind of a taboo, like if you're a minor and after several years you go to doctor and say, okay, I have a problem in my lungs, they will say, okay, that's a labor disease, right? But in journalism, it's like if you say, I feel traumatized, it's like you're weak. But actually no, it's like you're exposed. It's like being exposed to radiation, so eventually you will have some effects. So everyone deals with that in a different way. Unfortunately, the first way for many people is just going to the bar, getting drunk, doing drugs. I know many war cameramen that are very, very hooked to marijuana or hashish. That's a reality. But the healthy way is like, okay, you have like I don't know, you need to get out of this environment, even your own journalistic environment, because we keep talking about that when we meet out, just socializing with each other. So I think it's good to have like a different kind of environment, like with normal people talking about normal stuff, an ability to disconnect. I think you need to have a healthy life as well, like having a good diet, working out, And and it's very important, I feel like, just to get out of that environment, because the more you stay in the environment, the more you stay in the same. And in my for instance, I was in Iraq, like I think more than 1 month, but I was editing this documentary for several months. So I was editing all these videos of by ISIS executing people, you know so I would finish like editing at 8, 9 p.m, 10 p.m, and I would go to see other journalists in the bar in my neighborhood, and they were talking about the same. we kind of normalized it, so that wasn't very healthy, right? Because it's like you don't disconnect from it. So everyone has different ways of dealing with it, and I think it's very good to be able to get out of this environment and doing something different and going on holidays.
Are you
you know
going to
having
do? Are you guys going to distribute this film, like having more people to see it? What is the yeah, plan?
Oh, the movie was already, I mean, so you mean this documentary?
Yeah.
Okay, so the documentary had several goals, right? And first of all was like for the victims to have their own story told, so they could see themselves on camera. So that was like the raw footage, because in the beginning, as I said, they wanted me to make like a 24, no, I think like it was 40 minutes documentary. But the sponsors were like asking for more every time. It was, oh, we should also include this person. Oh, we should also include. So it was getting longer and longer. So I delivered all of this, like the long format, and then they created like different formats themselves later for the
Yeah.
donors, for like they changed. I mean, it was like the base documentary, and from there they have like many other kind of different versions of it,
Yeah.
because
So when
1
was
hour and a song. So that
when
was
was
basically
when was this done? When was this version done? What year?
that was done in 2017.
Oh, okay, okay. That's pretty current.
And yeah, and then I remember that there was like a big screening of it for the Yazidis, because um, their city, their main city in Sinjar was destroyed, so many of them were living in refugee camps in IDPs. So all the interviews were made in these IDPs. I would go to the refugee camp and finding the victims and talk to them. So they made like a big screening in Dohuk, where the NGO had their main office. So they invited as many as they could. They took them from the refugee camp so they could see themselves there. And then they make a shorter versions for donors, for advocacy. So that was it. But yeah, it was like it was a hard work, because I had to do everything. I was filming, I had to make all the interviews, I have to edit it. I had to work with translators for many weeks, and it was very difficult, because they are speaking in Yazidi but also in Iraqian, and so it was like a lot of work, and I was exhausted after I finished. It was really, really exhausting. Yeah, I mean, I think it was like it was a very interesting experience. But if I had to do it again, I would be working with 1 or 2 more people, because it was too much burden. Yeah.
Right, right. It's a lot of work. So, yeah. Now we're about to wrap up our 1 hour session. So I wanted to ask you another accomplishment you had, which was you you were on the shortlist for the 2021 Festival Journalism Award. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I usually don't run for awards because I don't know. I think it's a lot of bureaucracy, and you know, and also as a white European woman, I have no right to any kind of awards. You have to be, whether you're American and then you get the American awards, or you are like from, like a region of interest. Like whether it's Middle East, Asia, Latin America.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in that case, I work for this amazing outlet in Brussels, which is called Equal Times, and I love them. They publish in 3 languages, in English, French, and Spanish. So they are like always very, very keen to, to invite us to run for awards, and we have like very good reports. I know that many journalists follow us. So my Spanish editor, Marta Checa, who is like an amazing editor, we used to work together for EFE when she was in Hong Kong and I was in Beijing. she told us, like, why don't you, I mean, there's this, she's always like trying to, make us apply for these awards. So I had no idea what were this, this fetish of awards for. So I said, okay. So she was the one suggesting, why don't you use this, apply for this story about the Uyghurs. So for people who is not familiar with the Uyghur issue, it's one of my favorite issues because I covered it in Xinjiang in 2009. Um, so, they are like mm, ethnic religious minority as well. There are Muslims, but there are different grades of of being Muslim. But they've been kind of persecuted by the Chinese regime, as many international media have been reported about. And they've been running away from China, and one of the countries where they come is Turkey, because the language is very similar, and they feel much accepted. And also Erdogan has this kind of policy, like they are our Turkic brothers from Central Asia. So Turkey is a very good place to research about them. I mean, there are huge communities here in Istanbul and also like in Central Anatolia. So yeah, I mean, I don't think it was a very original story. That's why I was surprised when I was shortlisted, because I thought, okay, we have been all reporting about Uyghurs, but I think I went like a step forward, because when you are reporting in these kind of stories where there is like a lot of imbalance of power, for instance, like Israel Palestinians, like as a human, you feel prone to go more to the Palestinian side because Israel is so powerful, right? So with the Uyghurs happens a little bit the same. It's like the Chinese regime is so powerful and they're just running away. So I found this, I thought that was very interesting, because it's always very interesting to portray, like, I mean, the fact that people are victims doesn't mean that they are angels. I went to this little restaurant in Seytin Bornu, Uyghur restaurant, and there was this sign in the main entrance saying, "Chinese are not accepted here."
Whoa.
So it's
Whoa.
like, yeah. So I thought, like, it's also important. So I included this into the report.
What
I mean,
year
of course, there.
what year was that?
That was like 2 years ago,
Wow.
2021. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So usually, yeah, you have this. So in Turkey, is something very interesting, because when I came here 10 years ago, you wouldn't find Chinese migrants. I mean, Chinese were not interested in Turkey, but there was plenty of Uyghurs. But when you have like Chinese businessmen visiting Istanbul, they will go to the Uyghur restaurants because they have, well, first of all, Uyghur food is delicious. I love it, but they will also have Chinese food, and they're kind of pragmatic. So if you go to the main area in Fatih, you will see that there are like a lot of Central Asian migrants going to these restaurants, but also Chinese who came just as tourists or for doing business. But then I went to this more like endogamic area in Seytin Bornu. So that was a very, very cheap restaurant. You wouldn't see any Chinese in that area. So I was in shock when I saw that paper hanging on the door, because it was like they are doing the same
Mm.
that they are complaining about in China. And I think this is important to be explained as well. I
Yeah.
was yesterday with a Russian friend of mine who is like opposition in Russia. He left the country. He's now living in Istanbul, and he's working for a media. And he's basically, I mean, he's editing, and he's basically editing, what the stories coming from Ukraine. And
Mm.
although he doesn't like Putin anymore, he feels also that Ukrainians are being unfair to
Mhm.
people like him. So as
Yeah.
you see, conflicts are always very complex. So I think that
Mhm.
maybe, I don't know why, but maybe it was shortlisted because of that, because I was giving more details. It wasn't black and white.
Mm.
You
Right.
know, it's like
Right.
maybe. So I was very surprised myself. But when I
Wow.
saw the other contenders, I thought, no way. I mean, there was like
Yeah.
amazing stories about Syria. So I thought, okay, they're gonna. I don't think they're gonna win, but it was very
That's
it was
amazing.
a very
Wow.
nice thing. Yeah.
I before we end, I wanted to play just a small section of the interview you saw. I interviewed Evan 2020 when everyone is experiencing the COVID lockdown. Those days, more or less, United States are being locked down, right? So I actually started this whole program. uh, Evan was, one of my victims at the very beginning because I was just interviewing my family and my friends, and so I'll just show you a little bit. This is very long, an hour, nine minute. Okay, let me see. Let me know if you can hear. Okay. So
Okay.
so
It only works when there's something popping. Of course, you have to organize the improvisational thoughts. Okay, so your question was, how did I come from a classical composer to today, right?
can you hear? Yeah,
Today,
and
like, it
you
seems
do.
like,
Okay, thank you.
yeah. Actually, you know what? The interesting thing is, when I first started composing, because thankfully there was I'm thankful they already start to have personal computers. So I just would escape from the trap that as a composer, if you don't have an orchestra performing your piece, you will never hear your compositions. Okay, with the computer, at least I can use some even the synth lines kind of cheesy, some qualities, but at least you can hear the voice going on. So you kind of help yourself. The computer will feed back to you about what your thoughts are. So that's how I started composing. But very soon, my kind of a composing getting to becomes a production composition, meaning that there are a lot of things that you actually, as a producer, you put music together. Because you work for commercials, work for TV, movie, and theater, and you don't just sit at a piano think about how orchestra will express that. You just do everything on your own. But that lasts until 22.
Okay, so it's really long, so I don't want to. I'm just giving the whole link in here in case somebody want to explore. Yeah, so my brother is very philosophical, right? At times,
Yes.
he loves to express how he feels, and yeah, so also we had a two. I actually Google Evan. I found stuff on the internet. Like he wrote a TV show called Babylon 5, and then also he has an album. This album, I'm gonna talk to the producer. I try because look, this is the album of Dalians. I don't know you have it. Maybe you already have it, Marga.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he sent me. Actually, it's interesting. He sent me all the songs because I asked him. I requested him to, and I told him that you should open a Spotify channel. I mean, this music. This is when I met him. I met him in 2003, and I think that he began going to the mountains in Yunnan
Yeah.
to record all these amazing folk songs coming from normal people. It's so magic.
I'm just playing very softly while you're talking. So
Yeah,
yeah.
he made me
So
love
this
Yunnan,
album
because
I
it's like
I don't even have
Shangri-La.
it. Yeah. So I contact this place. This is an uh Magna 2. Magna 2. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Are you relate to that?
No,
Magna
no,
2.
but I feel like if he sent us, I mean, he might have sent to you the songs as well, right?
Hold on one second. I'm gonna turn because I can talk and listen. Sorry. What did you say,
Yeah,
dear?
that that he might have sent his songs to you as well, right? The original tracks.
I have a disc of this, but then I couldn't find it, and I had it on my computer. Then I couldn't find it, so it's like I do use this music, some of them already in some of my videos. So
Yes.
I asked him. He said you can use anything, I write. So that was really nice. So
He should.
in my documentary, I made a documentary called My Yangon Diary. In the
I watch it.
end, is his music. It's called "It's Not Too Late." That was written 1989. That he wrote with a R&B African American singer and producer in Chicago, I believe. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, so I thought the song is very appropriate, right? The title, "It's Not Too Late," for
Yes,
my
that's
film.
true.
Yeah, so it's the ending credits was using that. It's really beautiful. But yeah, all right, I think our time is up, and I can talk to you forever, Marga. There's so much to
Me
talk
too.
about.
We
Um,
have to keep talking. It
I
was really short.
know. Do,
I was terrified because I'm not like, I don't like social media that much. I'm kind of shy for that. But it's been so fast. You
I know.
made everything so easy.
Yeah. So, I have one last question for you. Um, if a young person, right, like 18 or 19, who wants to be a journalist as his or her career, what is your advice to this young person?
Well, I mean, right now it's like a very difficult situation for journalism, like as for other professions, like since the internet appeared in our lives, people don't want to pay for news. So if someone wants to make journalism, I think the first thing to do is to think about what is the future of journalism and how to make journalists productive in terms of money, how to make the journalistic companies profitable, because there is no money for journalism. I mean, like you only have like the big media, like the Washington Post, the New York Times, they have enough money for doing things, but the rest is like really difficult. It's very expensive to go on the field. I mean, if I have to go inside Syria, for instance, I have to pay to a translator at least 300 USD per day. When I'm not paid that much as a journalist, so how can I? So I think that we have to be very creative because I think people are still interested in information, but we need to catch up with the new technologies and to see what is the real value of information. Why would people pay for news? I think this is a big question for anyone who wants to devote their lives to this profession. Then I can give many other advice in terms of traditional journalists: be humble, ask as many questions as you can, be courageous. You have to be daring. I mean, there are like, but this is the traditional journalist. Now it's more about how can we survive.
Mm.
Does journalism make sense in the 21st century? So I would ask them to think about that because, I mean, they would be in the beginning of a career that has not like a lot of future. So that's my biggest advice and also the biggest question mark about our profession. You need to be paid for your job. Otherwise,
Yeah,
it's not a profession, something
that's
different.
true. That's so true. So well said.
Mm.
All right. Thank you so much for being with me and being with our audience. And thank you, Miriam. Romero made a lot of nice comments. We have,
Oh,
do you know
I would love to see
Miriam?
them.
Oh, you can see on the right hand side if it's on your computer. There's
Oh,
like
really?
comments. Do you see comments?
Oh my
You will
God.
see it once we finish. Even now, there is
Okay.
on your right hand side of your computer, right? We're talking kind of on the left side. There is an
Yes.
area. There's a button says comments,
Oh,
banners.
yes. Because I had like
Yeah,
oh my God.
yeah.
Yes.
We have a lot of
My
people made
Miriam
comments.
Romero.
Yeah, Shabai was here. My cousin Jay.
Oh,
Thank you.
your son as well. I see Sean here.
My Sean's my son. My husband
I
is
see.
here. Dr.
Oh
J.
my God. How
Ron
many
is
people?
from California, filmmaker is here. Yeah, and Marianne, thank you guys. And then a lot of people they don't leave no, sometimes you have to have like a YouTube channel to
Uh-huh.
YouTube account to be able to make comments. So some people are
Oh,
listening
that's fascinating.
quietly. And this broadcast also simultaneously goes to YouTube and Twitter.
Hmm.
So thank you guys for being here. And if you guys like this session, please don't forget to like this video and to follow my YouTube channel. Subscribe. Do you have a YouTube channel, Marga?
Yes, I do. I do. I mean, since I left China, I started like being a bit more active in. But yes, I have a YouTube channel that where the documentary is uploaded. Actually,
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. So I
yeah.
think that I gave the documentary link to here if you don't mind.
Of course, go ahead.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for this,
yeah, yeah,
Tim.
yeah. Sure. So yeah. Well, thank you. And follow Marga. She has every she's on everything. She's on Facebook, she's on Twitter, she's on Instagram, and she's on everything. So of course she's the journalist. So yeah, so great to talk to you. And yeah, I'm sure we'll talk privately, and
A lot. We have
yeah,
to talk about a lot of stuff.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Thank
Okay,
you for
great.
having me, Chin. You
Oh,
are
thank you so much.
amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. It's kind of late for
Thank
you,
you.
right? Yeah. Thank you so much. And yeah, we'll keep talking, okay?
Okay, thank you. 非常感谢你。
Yeah, oh, 谢谢你，谢谢你。好，
我也
we're gonna end with our